Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Espresso Yourself Morning Coffee Review. So that's why you're going to see three people or hear three people, because we've got our good friend Doug joining us today. And we're going to be talking about all sorts of things, maybe not quite as related to review, but we'll get in there as we go. On that note, it is a wonderful day, the day after Labor Day, September 5th. Hope you all had a good time. Everybody didn't get too full of barbecue or campfires or all the good stuff that I did. But anyway, how's it going today, Michael?
It's going good out here in the Grand Canyon State. We're still hot, unfortunately, but excited for some cooler weather in October. So one more month, I would assume, of heat, and then we can start cooling down. And then into November. My Labor Day was great. It was more of relaxation, but Monday followed with some AU prep. So for those folks that are attending AU, we will have a booth out there. So feel free to come see us. I'll be there. You've seen Matt Lynn on here before. He'll be joining me as well. We'll be teaching a class that Monday, and there is an AIA credit for it as well. So if some folks are trying to get some credits, come join. I'm trying to work out some swag specific to the class as well. So feel free to come and join that. And it's how to connect with structural connections in Revit, I think. I should remember the name that I created, but it's Monday morning and it's 6 a.m. here. Pretty sure it's early for Doug. How are you doing today, Doug?
Doing great. Just got back from a week off of vacation, which is kind of nice. Wife and I were able to get away for a little bit and come back, and now I've got to pay for my vacation.
Where'd you guys go?
How that works.
We stayed local. We went to a little place. It's about 45 minutes away from us, but it's where we are. We're kind of semi-rural anyway, so we just went a little further kind of east and kind of hid out. It was kind of nice for a few days.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah.
I love a little staycation in the same state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's so much around here that we can go. Half an hour we're in the middle of the wilderness, really. For you go an hour east and it's even denser, right? For those of you who don't know where I am, I'm about an hour east of Vancouver, BC. So if I go even a half an hour further up, I'm in a town called Hope, BC, which you probably know from Rambo. That's where Rambo was shot.
Oh,
really?
Cool.
I didn't know that.
That's about a half hour up the highway from us. And they just did a big thing up there because it's some kind of anniversary up there where they had unveiled a Brian Dennehy statue and a few other things. And yeah, it's kind of cool. They actually really revel in the fact that that's where they shot First Blood. Well,
yeah, it's got to be coming up on the 40th anniversary of that movie.
Something like that. Yeah, it is a really small town. It's probably got 40,000 people in it in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
But it's a nice little town. So nothing wrong with Hope.
So
yeah, it's pretty up there.
Yeah, and density, it's more of like pines and stuff like that.
Pine, cedar up here for wood. That's what fir. All those are we're big softwood up here. Our largest industry in the province is forestry, has been for years, and it's all around Hope, right?
So speaking of wood and knowing your softwoods and your hardwoods, that kind of ties into what you do for a living. So what is it that you would say that you would do there?
I am a senior estimator at Towne Millwork, which is arguably Canada's largest architectural millwork company. We have some fights with one company in Southern Ontario and a company in Quebec to see who's busier on any given year. That's what I do. I started as a cabinet maker on the floor. Got my journeyman ticket in 2002. Wow. No, sorry. That's when I started my apprenticeship. I got my ticket in 2006. But I've been there ever. I was here. I was done kitchen work, moved into estimating probably about 9 years ago. It's actually, and I love it. I love pre-con. We were interviewing an estimator last week, and it came up, and I'm like, I would never go to operations. I really like what pre-con does and what it can do. There's something about seeing a project from drawings and seeing that come to fruition as it works its way through the system. It's really kind of cool when you see it at the beginning and then you see the various stages of it. It's something that you have to experience to understand what I'm talking about, but it is kind of different.
Oh yeah,
Right?
that was always one of my favorite parts of being involved with projects. I know I've got a couple projects in the Phoenix area that I'm particularly proud of, where I was out there when it was bare ground, taking pictures and then starting the drawing, doing the survey work, and then doing the survey staking, and then going there on opening day and like being, there for it was just really cool to see how the little sausage gets made and all that stuff in there. But you're talking about millwork, and
Yeah.
I'm a civil guy, so what's millwork? In the nice way?
Millwork's the pretty stuff. And unfortunately, we go in at the end of a project, which makes our job that much harder. I mean, we do everything from cabinets, which we call casework, to surrounds. Like, say if we were in a hospital, all the nurses' stations and things like that, we'll do all of that. Head walls, foot walls, the decorative elements in the lobby, we'll do stuff like that. You get into a hotel and we'll do work in the ceiling. We'll do the concierge desk, the desks and the stuff, all the wall paneling. We kind of do all that stuff. We do fancy boardroom tables. We also don't just work in wood anymore. We work in metals, acrylics, fabrics, solid surface. You name it. Wood is almost a byproduct now. what we do is we hardly use any solid wood. Most of our stuff is heat goods now, so we got to deal with all that. And laminates, we do a lot of laminate work. It all depends on the project.
Is that more of like a cost thing with not solid wood, or more of like an environmental?
No, it's a stability issue more than anything else. Solid wood moves. So when you're doing something like wall paneling, if you're doing like a 20, 30-foot wall that's 10 feet tall, that you don't want to do that in solid wood. You want to do that in, we mostly use MDF as a core. It's more stable. It doesn't move as much. Plus veneer is a lot cheaper and you can get a much better yield out of the log with veneers. Everybody seems to think that's an inferior product, but it really isn't. It's actually a superior product for the right application. We'll just trim it out in wood. Even when you're doing cabinets out of solid wood, you don't want to do that because it moves. That's why you'll see like casework doors will be 5-piece, where they've got a stile and rail and a center panel. It's to allow for wood movement, and you got to remember things like that when you're dealing with solid wood.
Right? And you mean movement by like shrinkage, expansion?
Shrinkage and growth. It really all depends. Like wood is hydroscopic even when it's sealed, so it will take on water, it'll take on moisture. Like even like one of the rules that we have to follow with AMAC, which is the Architectural Millwork Association of Canada, or AWI in the US, is we can't go into a building and put our material in unless the humidity is below a certain point. For that reason alone, it'll just cause too much damage to the wood, right? Even with particle board cores, MDF cores, anything. So it's something we really have to take into account. And it depends on the region we're in too. So if we were to put something into Arizona, for example, the humidity level.
That's what I was gonna say. Like we've never maybe dealt with that here. Maybe that's like so foreign to me. I'm thinking, well, what do you mean? Because I don't think we experience that out here.
Yeah, the humidity. There's zones throughout the U.S. So and throughout North America. So the humidity level is different in Minnesota and British Columbia and Arizona, for example. And we do a lot of work in California, so we have to deal with humidity there. There's even a difference between Southern California and Northern California, just on the Northern Cali is a lot closer to what we are. Even in an air-conditioned space, it doesn't matter. And we had an issue up here last year where a company, during a heat wave, the company left the air conditioner on and it kept running and got super cold and it just dried everything out and it just caused major warpage, and they had to pay for the repairs to that. It wasn't covered by the warranty that we covered because it was a humidity issue, right?
So
That's
even
crazy.
like sealing the wood,
It helps, but it doesn't stop it,
Hmm.
right?
I
So
didn't think
that's,
about any of that.
yeah, when you live in a dry climate, it's not something you do think about. It's a little bit different. But when you live in a moist climate like the Pacific Northwest, yes, it's a big thing. And
Absolutely.
that's why even our architectural grade woods, like when we buy them, they're already at maybe 8 to 10, maybe 12% moisture. Whereas you look at a framing lumber, they're closer to 25, 30% moisture, right? So it's such a difference when we kiln dry the solid woods that we do get.
Yeah, you're talking about a much more precise level of detail that goes into that when you're measuring the moisture content and accounting for the shrinkage and expansion and all that other stuff. It's a lot different than just going to Home Depot and slapping stuff together.
Yeah.
Which is sort of what I do, but you know,
Yeah, I was
that's
gonna
fun.
say, I mean, that's my shelves back there. That's this
Yeah.
desk that I'm
That's another thing. I'm involved in a couple of woodworking groups like that. Even the particle boards and the MDF that we use are not the same stuff that you can buy at Home Depot. There's levels to the cores on particle board. So we generally use what's called an M2 core, which is a little more dense. Most of the stuff you buy at Home Depot is an M1 core, which is why it's so brittle. It's not quite as dense. It'll snap it doesn't hold screws as well. It's probably why particle board gets such a bad rap. But honestly, it's one of the best building materials out there because it's flat and it's stable and it's smooth. Right?
That's true.
And then you put the veneer on it.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that typically a laminate?
No, we do a lot of real wood veneer. So that's all done. We have our own veneering department just down the street from us. So we have to do all that as well. But we'll do a laminate on particle board core for casework or for countertops or wall paneling, whatever. It all depends on what the architect has spec'd.
That's crazy. No, the veneer, is that the thing that looks like a giant pencil sharpener where it's just cutting that really thin layer off of the tree?
It can. That's pretty much what it looks like. Yeah, it turns a 12-inch log into a toothpick in about 3 seconds.
That's too cool.
Yeah, I remember when I was out in Rome, that them talking about how the city of Rome was built, and them, I don't know if they were the first creators of veneer, but how stone was the inside portion of most of their walls, and then marble the exterior veneer to make as if the whole city was made from marble, to give it that like higher class echelon of a feeling. And they did it down the row where they would typically march people they've conquered to show that like this is superior. And that was the first veneer that's what they told me. And I'm like, I Googled it and it said, yeah, the 19th century, the Roman concrete, Roman Colosseum, the same thing, the veneer that was used, which is pretty wild.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice one, Bruce. And that's why it wasn't built in a day. So yeah, there's some other comments from Vince talking about MDF being banned over there. And I seem to remember that somewhere, but I don't know the whole story.
Well, it depends. MDF isn't banned. What has been banned is the urea formaldehyde glues that they used to use to put this stuff together. California basically banned urea formaldehyde glues. And when that happened, the industry switched to what they call NAUF. There's a different, which is non-urea formaldehyde. So it's not even used anymore in the pressing of the MDF.
What's wrong with formaldehyde?
It's a carcinogenic. The dust is brutal. I mean, just cutting the dust for MDF is brutal if you don't have the right dust extraction system.
So you're saying when I used to do woodworking and not wear a mask when I was younger is the worst thing to do?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I've heard of
Thanks.
guys. If you go back in the day to Norm Abrams from PBS, there, the New Yankee Workshop, he actually had his lungs vacuumed out about 10 years ago, getting rid of the dust and crap that can build up in your lungs by not wearing a mask.
Oh man, I love Norm. We used to watch that in shop class, and it was the best.
Me too, and all his toys. Oh yeah, that's pretty much what we have down on our shop floor. We have pretty much every toy you could possibly imagine. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, because I remember back in the day, I was like, oh, it's making me stronger by not wearing a mask. Nowadays, like whenever I do any woodworking, I'm always wearing a mask. But
yeah,
back in the day, it was the bee's knees.
Yeah, we're here in a big professional shop, we've got 2 massive dust extraction systems. And of course, everything's now done by computer. So all the dust is contained, and our shop floor is actually not very dusty. We can get away with vacuuming our rafters once a year now. There's just not that much dust anymore in the shop. It's kind of crazy.
That's awesome. That sounds quite nice. Quite nice indeed. I know I've sure made a mess this weekend in my garage, and like Michael, I should have worn a mask. But whatever. But,
I wear a mask now. Like anytime I'm doing any sanding, I used to be like, oh, it's not bad for you. It's fine.
No, it depending on what you're sanding, it can be quite bad for you. And even if you're sanding or routing, like we also do courtrooms and such, so we do work with ballistic material as well. And when we do that, it's like pressed together fiberglass. So, I mean, we have to put on the fancy suits and, seal ourselves off and put respirators on. And you got one guy with a router trimming it and the other guy following with a HEPA vac just to catch all the dust, to clean all that, because it's brutal stuff. But it
just makes me itch thinking.
It's horrible.
So where'd you start out before millwork? Like what made you get into millwork? Where did you start?
I wanted to work indoors. That's what I wanted to do. I was doing vinyl siding back in the day, and a job in a kitchen cabinet shop kind of opened up, and I wanted to get away from construction and work in a shop indoors at the same location every day. And that's kind of where I started. And then I spent the first 9 months laminating for a high-rise development here in Vancouver, and then moved into becoming a sawyer. So I started cutting all the parts, and pretty much after that, I started my apprenticeship.
So you started out in construction doing
vinyl siding.
And was that like a thought? Was that where you wanted to be in construction, like growing up, and that's kind of okay?
Yeah.
And then so you went and did that, and then you went and did some other stuff before you fell. So what made you want to do windows and doors? I used to actually work for a company doing custom windows and doors. What made you want to go and do that?
It wasn't really the windows and doors, that's a kind of a sub trade of millwork now. So just even in the cabinets, I mean, you're working with your hands, which is kind of nice. You're building something, you're creating something, which is really kind of cool when you do some of the custom stuff that I've done. But just the fact of being indoors, I mean, I'm in the Pacific Northwest. It rains 200 days a year here. You want to be inside where it's, reasonably warm and dry, and it's all good. That was kind of the main driver of it. And once I started to see where this trade could go, that's when I decided to go after my apprenticeship as well. Right. I'd actually taken what we call an entry-level trades training here. Oh God. I'm going to say about 35 years ago now. That sounds about right. No, 30 years ago now. And that kind of got me into what I wanted to do. It took me a while to find the right fit, but then I was able to find it, and then move into an apprenticeship.
And I feel like the trades have definitely taken a downturn in comparison to a career path in terms of not many folks are going into that part. And do you why do you think that is?
Well, probably because of the push that a college education is the only education. It's been, especially in the U.S., that was the push. And one of the things I would be most critical of former President Obama of was the push that college is the only answer, and it's really not. I mean, that, and I think too, the trade union movement in the U.S. is part of it. Why people don't really want to go there. In Canada, it's a little bit different. Most of our, like, I'm non-union. I mean, there's no union cabinet shops anywhere here, and I think there's one, maybe two in Greater Vancouver. The apprenticeship system is a different animal completely, and it's a great option for people, and I think people still see it as a fallback, where it really isn't. I mean, all the trades are very technical now, especially once you get into the office level. It's completely different than what you would think it is. I mean, there's nobody out there just swinging a hammer anymore or running a drill. It's not. I mean, there's so many technical parts to it now. We're doing augmented reality. We're doing drones. We're doing, blockchain. We're, all the stuff we do here in the office with review and 3D PDFs and, and Revit and all that stuff. I mean, we're not a bunch of dumb trades guys anymore. We can't be, right? The amount of math we need to know alone is nuts, right?
So so what you're saying is more of the push, instead of going in the United States in general, it's frowned upon if you didn't go to school. And I think that also comes to like applying for a job where they're requiring a specific or some type of college degree, whereas in reality, a lot of trades positions and a lot of positions in our industry require experience, which would have just been going to the trade, and then the software related to that would have been acquired to get into the other positions of, like what you're saying, more of the office environment or more of behind the chair, for my example of being in a chair now. But having that experience, and I think that does help a lot, is those folks that have the construction experience prior to coming over to the design part, right? Knowing how it actually is constructed, and then coming into the design portion actually lends more help to you. And I definitely hope, and I don't know if I'm seeing it myself, but trades pick back up in terms of an actual career path versus having to go to school first.
Yeah,
I sure hope so.
Go ahead, Michael or Jason.
Yeah, I just really hope the trades do come back, right? And I know I've told my son, and I see that Bruce has said the same thing. It's totally okay to go to a trade instead of a university, and I think reducing that stigma that you have to go in a massive debt to get a degree that you may not be passionate about in 5 years. No, it's just not worth it to me.
Yeah, I think for us, it's a lot different, especially here in the United States, that, college isn't free. So pushing someone to be and some people are fortunate, like my wife until she went to her, what is that? What do they call it? Post-grad school, had a scholarship, but most folks don't, right? Like I didn't have a scholarship, so I went to a community college that was more affordable. But again, being in that mindset of being aware of, pushing folks, especially here in the United States, into college, but that immediately means debt most of the time, right? Unless you're fortunate enough to have it paid for by either your family or some type of scholarship that you've applied for. And more power to you for being able to attain those. But I would say the vast majority of folks had to pay for school, but you're pushing people into debt for something in such a young mindset that you may not be aware of where you want to go down the road, right? Like, I mean, you're thinking about 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds right out of high school, don't even know where they want to go, acquiring large amounts of debt to a career path they don't know that's going to be launching them into the next 30, 40 years of their life. And then they have to pay that debt off versus a trade, right? You can go in and start earning pay immediately and start learning that path and where you can blossom into. And that's why I love these espresso selves, because we learn more about that, like that type of thought process of how you can come to this industry from maybe not a college experience perspective and learn that there are better, I wouldn't say better, but there are other opportunities that you can go through, like a fork in the road versus going to school. You can go in that journeyman perspective. So what is that process, Doug? Because I've never been through one of those.
Okay, for us here, I mean, again, everybody's a little bit different, but we have a model here. The apprenticeship program is actually administered by the government. It's mostly run by various trades, but it is administered by the provincial governments, but it's a national standard. So everybody kind of gets together. For my trade, it's a 4-year apprenticeship, and for most it is. I think electricians are a 6, but that's because they have some other math that they have to deal with. So we do, basically it's 2,000 hours a year, which is what you normally work anyway, plus 6 weeks in school once a year for 4 years. That's what we have to do. And the school component is a big component of it. Although, as you know, we always said when you're going to school, once you're in school, forget 80% of what you're doing in the trade, and then you go back to work and forget about 80% of what you did in school. So it's kind of fun. But when you come out of it, at least here in BC, I mean, I came out of it with an associate's degree as well as my journeyman ticket, which is valid all the way across the country. It never expires. It would help me get that, and the fact that my wife's a U.S. citizen would help me get a U.S. work permit in a heartbeat. Right now, it's just a good program, and we have programs here where it's essentially free. So you do have to pay, and I believe the 6 weeks is, I think it's around $600 right now for 6 weeks plus books. But
that's it.
That's it. That's about it. Because it is subsidized. I think it might be higher. It's been too long since I looked, but you can get that subsidized, and a lot of employers will pay for that. It's just part of a benefits package. Or you can apply for an apprenticeship grant, through which you basically get the money back from the federal government. Plus, you're paid while you go to school through our employment insurance program. So Canada has a national employment insurance program that we all pay into. We pay, whatever, depending on your income level. It's like 1.5% or something silly like that, which they will pay you 60% of your wages while you're in school. So wow. It's a great system. You can start an apprenticeship now in high school, depending on the trade that you're in, carpentry, joinery, mechanics. There's a few that can do that. Everybody really pushes it. We're actually developing a program here at Towne to train our apprentices properly, because we've noticed that they don't know certain things, and we're trying to prep them before they go, because each year you do something different. Like first year is pretty basic, and we learn the tools and we learn the different woods and whatnot. Second year, a little bit more of the same. You start doing your own drafting, you start doing your own cut listing and that kind of stuff. By third year, you get into curb and bending wood, and if you've ever tried to do that, that's fun. That's where the fun stuff comes in, right? Curb clamping and bending wood multiple different ways and shaping wood, that's the crazy stuff. And then fourth year, we do CNC work and veneer work, more curves, finishing, a bunch of stuff like that in fourth year. And then you got to write your interprovincial exam, which is loads of fun.
Yeah, so for here it says apprenticeship occupations last from 1 to 6 years, most average 3 to 4 years for the United States.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's probably fairly consistent. I think even in Europe, it's pretty close to the same. Vince could probably, say something on that, but I'm pretty sure they're most trades, like I said, are about 4 years. Some are 3. Electricians and um, welders work a little bit differently because they have different levels and different classifications of what they can weld. I mean, it's different tickets, but other than that, they're all pretty much the same. Comes to that.
Yeah, it says graduates who successfully complete their apprenticeship training will receive national recognized completion certificate, and an apprenticeship is considered the other 4 years degree. So apprentices earn salary while learning their craft. An apprenticeship combines the on-job training experience with related classroom instruction.
Yeah.
So after journeyman,
yeah.
So wait, so you're an apprentice, then you become a journeyman, and then there's a master, right?
There is. We call it in Canada, we call it the Gold Seal program. You got to do a few things to get your master. What the old world European level of master tradesman is a little bit different. I'm not sure where that falls in the U.S., but I know.
Yeah, Vince.
Like I say, we
what
call
are you
it
doing
here.
Across the pond?
Yeah, we call it a gold seal here.
So, but that is, how do you get that after you've gotten your apprenticeship?
Depending on the trade,
journey.
There's several courses or several different things you have to do to get your master. Plus, you have to hold your journeyman ticket for at least, we call it a red seal, for at least 10 years before you can even begin to apply for that. But it's just, there's various things to do. Depends on the trade. I've looked into it for joinery and I went, maybe. But it's like, sure, but
yeah, I just Googled it. It said master is the highest level of this electrician. At least 2 additional years, including 4,000 hours of work, is required to test for a master electrician license.
That's just 2 years work anyway. So,
So it's another exam essentially.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's wild.
So you have to test for your journeyman after your apprenticeship, and then you test again if you want to for your mastership.
Yeah, and you have to hit a stand. Mine when I went through was 80%. I believe I had to get on my interprovincial to pass.
All those different little tests and levels, and it's like getting achievements in a video game at some point, right?
Yeah,
you put in your time and your effort, and you get that little extra thing, and maybe that guides you to a different level of salary or responsibility or anything else like that.
Yeah, it does. When even a journeyman's ticket, you're going to go through and you should be paid a little bit more than even somebody who has only done their 6 years in the trade and may know a bit, but the things we learn in there that you don't even think about, like what type of adhesive works best with what type of wood and veneer. There's so much you gotta go into. And it's funny, my youngest brother is a carpenter. He is a red sealed carpenter, and he's like, we did like 2 weeks on hardware, and I'm like, dude, I do 4 years on cabinet hardware and things like that. He's always asked me, why is millwork so expensive? Why is it? I say, well, because I've got $3 million in machinery sitting down on my shop floor that has to cover that, has to produce that stuff.
Yeah, right? I think, wood is, whenever you're ordering something custom, you're paying for this specific person's time, but also what machinery they have to expedite the process, right? Like if I wanted to go and have someone create something for me, it's going to be, if you look at the overall budget of what it's going to cost you to build it and purchase the machinery, it's going to be more efficient to just have someone build it for you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Vince said that there's another couple of courses in an exam. David, I replied to David's, but he said kind of like the PE and SE, so like, professional engineer. structural engineer, right? You're going to school for those 4 years, then you're going to be an apprentice or a what is it
Intern.
called? I can't believe I forgot it. An E.
Oh, EIT.
Yeah, thank you. EIT. Thank you. Thanks, David. Can't believe I blanked that. An EIT, and then you take your exams, right? So, and sitting for which one you want to go through, depending on what path you want to take for engineering, i.e., like civil or go into more of the structural for building design. And those are paths, right? And talking about the different ways you can go, and that would require schooling, right? So it wasn't a knock at anyone going to school. I went to school and going through those, but just being aware that where your passion lies, it doesn't require you to go to school, to a 4-year college. You can go through a trades, and I think there needs to be more breadth into that and not be, looked down upon. I feel like that's kind of the mentality here in the United States, is that it's not very well received as a profession, right?
Yeah.
We talk, I mean, you hear about people like, oh, he's just a plumber, but plumbers, that's a 6-figure job all day long.
Yeah.
And it might not be a glamorous job, but it's an important, vital role to society. And it's extremely, the talent involved, the hard work, the physical contortion to get to some of these spaces, like that's hard work, and it pays very, very well. So whenever they're talking about, just a plumber or just a garbage man, like there's so many things that can pay great money and still provide that quality of life that most people want.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, HVAC is a godsend out here. If we love those folks. If you're doing that type of work, if my AC goes out, I definitely want somebody there that knows what they're doing to come fix it as soon as possible, right?
People don't really understand the trades, I think. I mean, even all those trades you just mentioned, the math alone involved in that, most people cannot do. I mean, when you're doing plumbing, I mean, as they say, stuff rolls downhill, right? Yeah. So you've got to calculate that. You need to know what size your waste pipe is, what size your supply line needs to be to get water this far. HVAC, it's exactly the same way. I would challenge anybody to figure out the length of a circular stringer on a circular set of stairs. I mean, that's tricky math. It's so much so that Bluebeam can't do it. Okay, that's how tricky that math is. But things like that, I mean, just that alone, even mechanics and the ratios and gearing that they need to understand and the math that they need to know. It's so much more than swinging a hammer, operating a drill, whatever, pulling a wire. It's so much more than that, the trades nowadays, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, even now, we're all looking at a BIM model now. So we all have to be computer savvy when we're out there on a job site now, right? At least we should be. We're all looking at drawings and trying to compare drawings together and laying that stuff together, right? This is where we are now.
Yeah, I think we kind of, at least I know in the United States, I can at least speak for us. We kind of shot ourselves in the foot by making it a stigma and not promoting it, because we now notice a ripple effect, right? I mean, it's the same thing when 2008 happened. I'd watched The Big Short the other day, by the way. It was really good. It was on Netflix. So you should check it out if you haven't. But the loss of folks from our industry from that alone, we're now seeing that ripple effect, because folks that were weathered through the storm were already in it for their tenure. Now we're reaching that retirement era where either folks have to work more because of that era, or they're ready to leave the industry, but there wasn't enough backfill from that, right? But then also the journeyman industry, we're reaching that same type of mentality too, because folks didn't think that it was an opportunity for them to have a career in, which it is, right? It's something that is definitely needed, and there shouldn't be a stigma for any career path that anyone wants to go through. And unfortunately it was.
Yeah. One of your, a guy named Todd Wyant over at one of your competitors down there, hosts another podcast, and it's one of the things he champions a lot is the marketing that construction needs to do to bring people into the trades. He really, really pushes it, and he's dead right. I mean, we all need to do that. Here, the government's pushing, trying to get first years into the trade. We need housing here in Canada. I mean, that's one of the things they say, that the housing crisis, and it's probably happening in the U.S., but we have no one to build this stuff. That's just the reality of it right now. You get we have several big mega projects going on here in the city of Vancouver. The Oak Ridge Mall that I showed earlier, we have a brand new hospital being built as well, and a couple other hospitals being renovated, and it's just taxed our tradesmen. So we're trying to, where do we get the rest of these people from? Right.
And I think that couples, like, that's a ripple effect in and of itself for the person purchasing the property and building it, because those tradesmen that are taxed know that they can charge a higher premium for their experience in the field. It's just a ripple effect. Everything becomes more expensive. Material was really expensive during COVID.
Oh yeah, it was nuts. Steel was crazy.
Yeah. But I think we've finally kind of come down from all of that. But still, the cost for folks that know their job is valued is obviously going to be more expensive, because they know that they can charge a premium for what they know.
Yeah, we have experienced some wage growth up here, which is, from an employee standpoint, it's been a really good thing. Not so much for my boss. He understands. So that's the thing. But we've had projects here put on hold because of that. They were budgeted, 2018, 2019, and now they come out, they start ready to go out to tender, and all of a sudden, whoa, wait a minute, the budget's gone up 40%. And they're city projects like rec centers or community centers or libraries, that kind of thing. And the city governments are going, whoa, wait a minute, we're just going to have to put the brakes on this here for a little bit, right? They got to find some funding. Even we're finishing up a private school here in Vancouver, and it's the same problem. They were budgeted. They have a budget going in, and now costs have ballooned, and through 2020, 2023 as it changes, and they're even private school with a bunch of rich people are still having problems coming up with the budget, right? And this is a higher end people of Vancouver, right? So Vancouver's got its fair share of rich folks, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think it comes down to that intermediary year of high school. Because I remember when I was getting ready to graduate, they were starting to close down those shops. But I've talked to folks where now it's part of it. You can go to and work during it, which is great. So it's coming back from that year of when people are learning and understanding where they want to go. But I do remember there being automotive shop was shutting down, our actual wood shop was shutting down. And it was more in my later year of high school versus my early year, because I attended those. And, you learn great things, not even if you don't want to go into that part of the industry, right? In terms of, sweating pipe, going through and fixing walls. We did all of that, I remember we'd have a little wall that you would actually make a hole in to see how to repair it, right? So we'd go and put a hammer, we'd go and sweat pipe, and then we do, typical PVC. We do all of that just to show what you can yourself do in your own home. Of course, I had someone come and do stuff at my home, because I wouldn't want to go through and do that in my own home, because I've never installed a pressure valve to enter my home, so that kind of stuff. But also going through and doing low voltage wiring, that would be something that you want to do, extending things out. I did that in my backyard, and just being able to do it yourself, or to go, if you like it, into the trade, right? I think it starts in those earlier years. If you don't have family members that are in the industry, of knowing that that's an option.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that probably should have touched on, is the trades have been pulled from high schools in the U.S. I mean, you hear it all the time, and you can't. I think you're just shooting yourself in the foot.
Well, we see that ripple effect now of where we're at, and this again, it's just the stigma of folks saying it's not white collar job, right? Like I think that's the stigma of it. It's not a professional job when it really is. You can't make a lot of money, you know.
They just put in a career academy for my son's high school. So they took like an old Sam's Club, turned it into a career academy. And there's like a pod for car mechanics, and there's a kitchen one, and there's a lawnmower repair, and there's like HVAC, and there's all these different ones. And the kids are getting bused from their normal high school to come over here for a class where they can learn this stuff. So it's pretty cool that they're branching out too, even though it's in the public school system. It's still allowing for at least the exposure. Right.
Yeah, I think that's the exposure, right? That's the word I was looking for.
Like looking at a commercial kitchen, like working in there, that's a hard work, man. That's tough, but I like to eat. It's sort of vital, and it's a nice treat. So being able to do that would be super cool. And then, all the other things that go on with our everyday lives, so I'm all for teaching that exposure but I don't know if it would change what I'm doing now. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it would have just led me. I think what pushed me into this was we used to do at our church, we used to do mission trips out to Rocky Point, so Sia Cortez, Puerto Penasco, to build homes, and that really is what launched me into this, was that exposure of being able to go through and help people, but also build homes and learning the construction aspect of which you wouldn't build a home in 3 days here, but there you pour concrete literally the first day. The next day you'd come back and you'd start building the frames. It was wild. But that exposure was at my younger age, and being aware of that kind of pushed me into this passion of mine and exposed me to it, where some folks may not have had that. There's that lull where they started to decommission that part within our younger learning. And I think as we're all seeing now, that ripple effect from the stigma behind it.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
And then you get guys like me, I really started using computers when they first came out. I was 13 years old when my dad got our first one. Yes, that was like 40 plus years ago now. So, I've just evolved it. So you've taken the trades, and if tradesmen are valuable, tradesmen who can work in the office are even more valuable right now. So we have a few journeymen in our office, and they are the better ones that work in our office. But you can take this and go that much further with it. We have some excellent drafters here, excellent and project managers and that kind of stuff. And their trades knowledge really helps building them. I am not a drafter. Like I was talking to guys earlier, I last used AutoCAD during my apprenticeship. I am not the one you want drafting your project, but using Review and now doing the data analytics and the data washing that I do and that kind of stuff now, it's a different path for the trade. And here I am, a tradesman with a little bit of university training, and I'm now getting into data analytics. So this is not your typical walking around in the mud laying foundation wall. It's not. That's not the trades anymore. We're just not there.
Yeah, you're using solutions like Bluebeam, a PDF solution, to leverage data to get that data, and then you learn Power Query to wash this data, right? And that's all technical, coming from a software solution. So if you think of trades of, and there's nothing wrong with if you want to be in that part of the con end of this industry, but there's other opportunity outside of that, and that is the technical aspect. Like you, Doug, you went through that journeyman experience, but then you found, hey, I loved it. I was passionate about it. And, maybe it's an age thing, or you weathered the storm. Okay.
I
didn't want to go there, but yeah, maybe then at that age, that doesn't mean that you have to continue being in that part of the industry. You can go to this other aspect where you become even more valuable because you have that trades experience to now become more technical, right? And at what your age is, Doug, and you don't say here live, but now you're learning more. now you're learning more of this software, right? So you're still learning, you're still engaged, you're still continuing that education, even though you didn't go to a 4-year university, or you went to, you know, some type of it for your journeyman, but there's still opportunity. And I think that's where the mission statement is lost, is that, you know, you do this one thing in trades and you're set there for the rest of your life. But when really there's so much more room to grow in the industry.
No, that's true. I mean, the construction operations is lacking. Hugely, pre-construction is lacking, and we need these people to come into that industry. We need people who've got some college education and understand the business side of it a little bit more than some of the trades guys. But we need them working with trades guys. The term is kind of reverse mentoring, where both sides are learning from each other. So the guys with just the college experience pick up the field experience, and vice versa. It just helps all the way around, right? Guys like me we're a rare breed where we've come from the floor and go that, and you know, and all that foundation helps. You know, you can't do what I do without the foundation behind it to know, okay, you got to go back a little bit sometimes and go, well, we have to do it this way, right? Even anybody who's gone through the apprenticeship program is going to benefit from it, right?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like the same thing when people are applying to positions and a requirement of having experience. It's like the same ripple effect there, where you're trying, you know, I think we need to be more open to mentorship in our industry of, hey, you know, you at least you have this knowledge, let's push you into this knowledge, of giving that back and forth, like you're saying, Doug, because I think it is definitely lost where we're requiring folks to have like 10 years experience when that's not feasible nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole point of the apprenticeship program, is mentoring. I mean, that's what you do. I mean, once you become a journeyman, you're kind of obligated to be working with an apprentice. I actually made the suggestion in my 4th year at BCIT, was that maybe because the way they run the classes there, they run the 1st and 3rd and then 2nd and 4th year classes together in the same building. And I kind of said, you know, maybe what if, you know, 1 week out of that class, the 3rd years were working with the 1st years, or the 4th years were working with the 2nd years, just kind of loosely working, just pair them up and kind of start doing that. Because that's what we do in industry. We have apprentices here that are assigned to journeymen, and we work together, and it all depends on your level, but mentorship is key. We have to get people to understand how this stuff works, right?
And how it's built. I think at the end of the day, you can design as much as you want, but if you don't know how it's going to be constructed, you're going to be limited to what you're seeing on a plan set. Because you don't have that knowledge of how it's actually going to be built, because majority of the time it differs from what you're seeing on the CD set.
Who's that? Is that Escher that makes those engineer drawings that that they work on paper, but they absolutely cannot be built? I saw Bruce saying something about it, and Vince talking about it in the chat there. Yeah, you can't. If you don't think you can build it, you shouldn't be drafting it. And I know when I did some drafting, I am thinking about how it has to be built as I'm drawing it. When I do little projects on my own, I'm just using SketchUp or something, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, how am I going to build this? And then you can kind of draft it this way. And now with the 3D elements and the models and how everything ties together, I mean, I'm going to go back to that model that I showed you. We're like working directly with structural steel and glass on that, and we've seen different parts of that model come together where we're seeing that it just doesn't work in the model, but we're able to fix it there, where, you know, where the top of steel was at the wrong point, the glass wasn't quite lining up as it all lines up as it goes around the curve. And when you're dealing with a sloped curve, that everybody's paying a little bit more attention to it now. It's like, okay, we really got to pay attention to this to make sure it's right before, because I mean, our millwork alone on that staircase is close to $8 million.
Wow.
So, and the structural steel under that doesn't include the glass, by the way, but the structural steel underneath that is going to be at least that, right? So you don't want to get this wrong, right?
Yeah.
That's a big liability for someone if you mess up, right?
And that comes down from like, and I know how you were saying that training experience. I encountered that when I was doing custom windows and doors because we had a floor, because there's always going to be some type of, and that was more human error than what we have now of like how they're constructing it, interpreting things. But there's always, that's why you have clearances, but margin for error and how things are going to construct, how people are going to interpret something. But really what comes out is the cost, because something gets built together incorrectly. You have to scratch that whole project itself if you can't salvage it. And that's who's flipping that bill.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. There was a couple of times that happened on our floor. And yeah, I mean, of course the company is going to eat the steel that they put together. And then what if the glass was ordered incorrectly for the shell of it, right? The glass didn't fit, it was shipped in. So
yeah, that's templates are a thing, but we're really all working together. We have a weekly coordination meeting. Now that's another thing in the trades. Now we're all using Teams or Skype or whatever it is now. It's like, no, we're not swinging hammers, guys. I can't push that any further. And everybody here is probably in agreement. This is a very technical industry now.
And it's definitely pushed more to collaboration. I think that's what I love about the industry. And that's why I love this show and what we do here is like that collaboration part, right? That is definitely finally starting to take a hint that we're not a singular team, right? Like structure isn't just structure. It's us coordinating with multi-disciplines in that we're one team trying to deliver a product, which is a building design or something, right? Yeah. Or coordinating with you, Doug, right? In terms of creating all of that millwork. It's not a singular team. It's one team trying to push a product to a client.
And we have to interact with so many trades, being a finishing trade. I mean, structural steel is not one we normally do, but in some cases we do. But electrical, plumbing, food service, HVAC, you name it. We're basically integrating with them. I don't know, even framing. We've got that private school we're doing, the wall was almost 2 degrees out of plumb. Well, you can't put wall paneling on a 40-foot wall that's 2 degrees out. We had to stem all that out, and we're fighting to who's paying the bill on that because we don't allow for that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy, but that's not our fault. But we have to make it look good, right? At the end of it, as they say, yeah, lipstick on the project. We're the pretty stuff. It goes in at the end. There's like 4 trades that go in after millwork, and it's like, but if the framing's not right, then we have to fix that. If the glass isn't right, the structural steel, if we're trying to clad the structural steel, which we hate doing because of their tolerances versus a millwork tolerance, it's just costly, right? And trying to convey those costs and those realities to a GC sometimes is very tricky. And it's one of the things we do fight all the time. I mean, I think structural steel has a tolerance of 1/4 inch over 12 feet. We have 2 millimeters over 8 feet, right? It's not the same.
No.
I worked in mills and I was doing those custom windows and doors, and I never want to go back because we had a tolerance of a mill, and it was just ridiculous.
Well, that's crazy, and that
sanding
also
and caulk, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
just finish it up with some sanding and caulk, and that's a good segue for us to wrap up today too. Doug, this has been a lot of fun. I think we had a very good conversation about importance of trades and all sorts of things and all the cool stuff that you're doing up in BC. So with that said, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for listening in, for everybody who's listening in, and we will see you next Tuesday for a normal morning coffee review where we'll get more technical in nature and under the hood in Bluebeam review. So have a good week, everybody. And Mike, I'll let you send us out of here.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining again for Espresso Self. Thank you, Doug. We appreciate it. We love talking with you, and we love giving back information to the industry and kind of where you can go. So, in that capstone, thank you all for attending. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for all of you. Until then, we'll see you next week.
All right. See you, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.